Okay. So let me give a quick introduction, not just for the people here. A lot of you know me. I already recognize a lot of names out here. Um, but this is part of the Amplio community practice, and we call this a monthly Miro board giveaway. It's actually every 4 weeks, but that's close enough. And this board is team estimation, and this is actually part of the Amplio Development Path to Effective Lean Agile Teams book. I don't know that we do this in the workshop called the Amplio Development Masterclass, but Success Engineering, my company, and I'm Al Shalloway. For those who don't know me, I guess I should have a page up there and I'll add some information. I've been around a long time. Started computers in 1970 for, almost 30 years. Mostly that's what I did. I wrote software, wrote vertical applications. And I became a consultant actually in 96 when I moved from Atlanta to Seattle and found I liked it. And since then I've been consulting and coaching and moved quickly from technical training. I've written technical books. I studied design patterns, wrote a book on design patterns and some other things. But I formed Net Objectives in 99 and was acquired by the PMI in 2019 and left the PMI a year and a half ago to form Success Mentors. And I've been focusing more on process because there are a lot of good tech people out there. And I could give you references if you want tech training. I know some of the best trainers ever who used to work with me, so I know them very well. So shoot me an email if you need that. But I focus now on basically very small to large scale adoptions of Agile to create business agility. I think there are a lot of gaps there. The Amplio community of practice is actually geared toward just offering standalone. By that I mean they can be done at any level. Some of them are fairly advanced, but somebody without a lot of background could still watch them. And we alternate between these Miro boards that giveaways. If you're in the Amplio community practice, you can actually get this. And this link, I'll give you this, the path to this board in the share. So you'll be able to link to this. In fact, because you're going to have to link to this because this is going to be a participative event. So you're going to need to change things. Just don't change things by mistake. Hello, Control Z is a great. My favorite key, still favorite. So here, let me put this in the chat because you're welcome to go into this board. Great. So the community of practice gives away these Miro boards for free if you're in them. You need your own license. We also have, I've just introduced this, what I call Amplio Team. Amplio is my approach. Amplio's Latin for improve. And Amplio Team is my approach to team level, not Scrum, but kind of Scrum Kanban level. Amplio Development Masterclass predates Nexus, but it's kind of at that level, multiple teams. And then the Value Stream Consultants, a kind of an advanced workshop intended for DAVSC graduates. I still teach the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant workshop with Joshua Barnes. I will be creating an Amplio at mid-scale. This is an alternative, say, for people less than, say, 400 in the dev. I know how to do it. I just have to make materials since I sold all my materials to the PMI. And the Amplio Consultant Educators Program, this is for seriously good people already. And I basically am disseminating my, 23 years of Agile experience. There are a lot of things I know that have never been documented. Things I know, things I learned from other top consultants. So every week we take on a topic, or we do 3 sessions a month, 1 hour each. So these are all available, and I've got links, and you could take the clicks there. Okay. So that's a little bit of the background. Now, why am I doing this? And why am I doing Amplio team estimation, especially when there are other estimation techniques out there? Okay, my experience is that current methods, and the common one when people do estimation is planning poker, is not very effective. And I'll tell you the story of where this happened. I was at a if we could mute, if everybody can mute, that'd be great. There's some noise background. Anyway, a long time ago, like 15 years ago or something, I was out at a kind of a think tank, government think tank, and there were a lot of PhDs out there, and they were very smart, and they were doing Scrum, and they were doing basically planning poker, and they were really complaining. I was doing a tune-up for Scrum. Could everybody mute? I can't. I'm trying to see where to do the mute. There's a lot of noise by some people, so please mute. Anyway, Anyway, I was doing a Scrum tune-up and they were complaining. So these are very smart people. They were doing Scrum okay. We actually helped them quite a bit more. But one of the things they really complained about was the time it took to do estimation. And you had a lot of smart people with specialized skills as well. And they were very much in a hurry to get going. I don't think they really appreciated that we were there. I say we, not objectives. I had another guy tag teaming with me on it. So like I had an hour with this group and they were like, okay, you got an hour, and I heard what they were doing. I guess still remember, I was just supposed to see where they were, not give them advice, was the agreement type thing. So I remember at one time I said, well, you give me 5 minutes and talk about things. And so I said, yeah, we'll give you 5 minutes. So I gave them a little bit of 5 minutes about lean agile and stuff. And then they said, okay, you can take another 5 minutes. So when we got to the team estimation, they knew I knew what I was doing, and they also knew I wasn't forcing anything on them. Was by the way, that's a big thing. I have another book that you can find on the website as well called Being a Professional Coach. And I don't mean professional in the sense like a life coach or something like that. I mean a professional, like somebody who understands their business and what they're doing. Anyway, at some point I heard they were complaining about estimation and how long it was taking. And I said, okay, can we try something? It'll take me 5 minutes to teach you this. And then let's just do our estimation. Do your real work that you're going to do, but just try this. And I showed them Team Estimation, which is by Steve Bockman. I don't have his original reference to it, so I have some other links to it, but I don't have those. And by the way, notice on my screen, this is one way to navigate, is, I wish I could didn't notice this thing was up here. There we go. If you come in and it looks like this, excuse me, if you come in and it looks like this, you've got a thin panel, you can get it up by clicking here on the left. See, that pulls this up. What's cool is then you can navigate through this. See, I use Miro now a lot of times instead of PowerPoint. It's kind of cool. So I started here, I'm coming to this one, and I've got some references here. I can't find Bockman's original article I'd read. I mean, this was like 20 years ago. That he wrote it or something, a long time anyway. But this is a close description. James Grenning Planning Poker Party, which is not Mike Cohn's Planning Poker. I don't know how Mike trademarked the name that already existed, but he did. This is quite different, and it's also very cool. You should read this. But what I found with Bockman's thing was that it was true relative estimation, which planning poker isn't. We're going to actually run through and do one of these too. I'm not going to read all these. I'm not going to read all these instructions. I just want you to see that I've laid out. This is basically the chapter in the book on this. I'll zoom back and you can see. So I copied the chapter in the book here so you can have full instructions, but we're going to actually do the exercise over here. Okay, but I'm going to get to that in a few minutes. So finish the story and then we're actually going to run this. The thing is, these guys had a lot of problems. They were taking a lot of time estimating and they had two main problems. One was the time. And the other one is not everybody could estimate. There were topics. These were PhDs. Okay, I've got 2 masters, 2 undergraduate degrees. I've been to MIT, and this first time I ever felt stupid around people. I mean, everybody there had a PhD. I mean, people just really advanced. And some of the topics were very sophisticated, and some of the things they had to do, like one guy knew how to do it. One guy knew what the story meant. So the normal estimation of everybody estimating didn't really make any sense there. So that was one of their problems. So I showed them this way of doing it. It's actually very simple. And I'm just going to show it and I'm going to set it back. But you basically, and I call these IBs, items being estimated. And I'll explain why. I don't call them story cards or index cards. The thing is, you can do this for any technique. And in fact, in our workshop, we actually do this not with estimation of like something to build, but we do it like, what are our biggest challenges? So you can think about, there are lots of ways to use this. In other words, in the beginning of the Amplio team workshops and development masterclass workshops, I always like people to understand what their challenges are, what their problems are. And what we do is we have an exercise where we lay these all out on a mirror board. And then what we do is we take them and we put them down on a board and we estimate the bigger ones to the left and the less important ones to the right. And it's just a visual way of laying out what you have to do and getting collaboration. People just move it all around and stuff like that. Anyway, I showed them how to do this in like 5 minutes. And basically it's real easy. You just move you know, like in here, well, let's say we're estimating the weight of these guys, you know, well, where's the line? Okay, well, so we put it to start, and then so all you do is you click, then come back, hold it down and move it over, except Mac is always helping me out with stuff I don't want. There's a dog, you know, I just keep putting them in columns, and there are different ways to do this. One way to do this is one person, the normal way of doing it is one person does it. And then sometimes, if in this case, it might be, well, what does dog mean? You know, well, it depends what size dog do we, what are we doing? So you can actually move things down. This is one of my additions to it. We need to talk about this. We may do it now, we may do it later. Usually these things are written a little clearer than this. I mean, the stories are, you shouldn't be like this, like dog, that's kind of vague. So they need to be more explicit. But what you can do is then and this is one cool thing, notice about, oh, I thought I made this, not locked. What you can do, what's cool about, and don't you do this, let me do this if it comes to it. If we need to move a column, we could actually move columns in Miro. It's kind of a neat thing. Anyway, what they did is we just went there and we just went around the room, and one person moves a card or an IBE up in the column, and then you go is more significant, less significant. These are all little, like maybe a hippo. Well, hippos look bigger, so I'm gonna move it over there. A bear and a hippo, about the same size. So I can also put them under here. Yeah. I can move things. I got a mouse. Let's use a mouse. Works better. See, so I put them basically where this means this is significantly smaller than this, which is significantly smaller than this. We're not worrying about the sizing yet. Worrying about the number slows you down. But relative, notice how this is a relative to each other, not relative to some preordained number that we use. So it actually works a lot better when you do this. So here's what we found. So what happened is I said, hey, let's just take these cards. And let's just, because they had a bunch and they had stickies already, and they had it on a wall. And I said, okay, let's just take these and let's just do this. And it took them about 15 minutes to estimate all the things they were going to estimate. And I said, that's cool. And they said, yeah, that was good. And they said, normally that would have taken them an hour. And that's been about my experience with this. And we ended up, I'll come back to this, you do end up with something like this. Okay, so I'm going to walk through this just to show you. I'm not going to read the instructions. I'm going to, because I pretty much gave you the instructions. So you notice how I can click on the left. But you start off with something like that. You don't really need the lines. You add, the player to where it is. So you end up with putting some of the IBEs here. And then another option is if you say, well, that's not significantly, it's about the same size. So this also gives you talking points. Now, this is another question. It turns out, when do you talk is not clear. Sometimes you want to talk while you're doing it. Sometimes you want to defer the talking to the end, because then you can settle disputes when everything's up there and it gives you a better picture. So that's an option. I've got it listed as an option in the write-up. Do I talk while I put the cards down? Do I talk at the end? Talking at the end seems to be as good or better and a lot faster. But you could play with it. It's not like there's a right way or wrong way. It's really kind of what works. So then you end up with this. And then you add the numbers. And we use a modified Fibonacci sequence. I say modified because once it gets past 20, we just use these are the numbers we use. And I'll tell a little story about this. Significant, the neat thing about Fibonacci is things, except for the 1 to 2, things are mostly not quite half, which is good. And I can still remember this conversation when we went 20, 40, 100. Every consultant and Net Objectives wanted this, and I get a little OCD at times. I said, no, no, this is 2.5 times. That's not good. This is 2 times. Now we're 2.5 times. Are you crazy? And I had a rule, and I obeyed it. I was the CEO and owner, so I could make some rules. But one of the rules I had was that I could never use my authority as CEO to handle a technical question. In other words, I might really dislike this, but I couldn't demand we're going to do it my way because I'm the owner, the CEO of it. My attitude was people are always, you're skilled in an area. So nobody has expertise in everything. And if I've got 5 consultants telling me I'm doing wrong and we're all about equally skilled, well, I don't get to have the authority. So we talked about it. And what we realized was that as it gets larger and larger and larger, you're getting less and less precision anyway. So the 20 to 40 and then 40 to 100, yes, it's a little anachronistic, but that's actually to remind us that as we get larger, it doesn't make any difference anyway, because there's no difference between 80 and 100. It's like nothing, except some of us get a little OCD on that. Okay, so I'm going to pause for questions, and then we're actually going to try this. Because you can unmute or you can put the question in the chat. Oh, good, we got some chat questions here. Yeah, great. And thanks. I'll repost it again just in case, because I don't know why Zoom doesn't have an option to show the history, but they don't. Okay. So, so this, you'll see as you move around on the board, this at the end, I have something else where I have these instructions. These are something that I use sometimes in live. I'm going to kind of fix this up a little bit. This is based on the planning, but I mean on the estimation thing, but it's something where we use to mostly rank our challenges, and I modified it a little bit. The idea of this is quite cool, and there's an example we use. So this was, you can see, most significant. Here we were estimating things, challenges people had, and the red ones were like the really big ones. Or I can't remember why we did red now. I think somebody just used red. And then below the board, well, we got to talk about these more. So that's just a variant. Feel free to use it, use variants. There's not like a set rule here on how to do this. But let's go to the board. Okay. And what I'd like to do, and hopefully, I'm just going to pick on the people who are on my participants list. So in the order, so if you could just say pass, that's the other option. I don't remember if I put that in as an instruction, but the way it starts is you do this, you put, and I just picked anything. I just picked some animals. I figured that would be kind of easy. You always start with the first one going there. So this is the starting point. So Paul, you're at the top of my list. Could you move the dog to the right column, or you could tell me where to move it? That might be easier if you're not familiar with moving things.
No problem. I'll do that. There you go. Al.
Excellent. So Susan, you're next. And you can tell me how to do it too if you don't want to do it yourself.
Yeah, move the eagle to the in the same column as the dog.
Okay. Yeah, because they could be the size. Okay. Hiromi, where does the sparrow go? You can ask me to do it, or you can do it. Oh, you took the hippo. That's okay, actually. I wouldn't even care. That's good. So it's to the right of the line. That's right. Oh, John. Hey, how are you doing? Take the sparrow, put it someplace.
Put it, Al, can you move it next to the dog in the column before the dog?
Yeah. Here we go.
Thank you.
Okay. And Jim, the bear, and I'm happy to move him. Cool. Scott.
I guess my question is, are there any rules about, could we shift everything but the sparrow to the right and put the monkey between the sparrow and the dog?
Absolutely. That's exactly what we do. See, the idea is perfect. So the monkey, he's saying the monkey is significantly bigger than the sparrow, but significantly less than the dog. So what we do, and in Miro, this is why I like to use tables. In Miro, if you click here, I could have sworn I unlocked this again, but I'll do it again. You can take this and just, oops. You can do it 2 ways. You could actually move a column. Why am I having troubles here? Well, I'll do it this way because it's, for some reason, I can't seem to do it the other way. You can click what you want and now move this. And this is exactly right. We're opening things up as we go. We're not really worried about any specifics at all, just relative sizing. And if somebody also said, well, wait a moment, the dogs we have are big dogs, you know, then you could do the same thing. You could come up here and say, add a column and then move the dog here, okay, because we got big dogs. Or you could have moved the dog down below. So don't worry about the rules. The idea is you want to get each column. This is the key piece. Each column, in fact, I realized I didn't put this up there. This would be a nice little reminder. Each column needs to have things about the same, whatever you're estimating. And how you get there, that's up to you. And I find playing with the rules to be a useful thing. The result is what we want, not the method to get there. Although I'm making suggestions about what I've seen that works well. Okay. So now we have the sparrow, the monkey, the eagle, the big dog. Oh, I forgot this. Sorry. This is an anachronism of Miro, and I knew not to do what I did, but I did anyway. If you build something inside a column, it automatically expands unless you have the control key down, I think, when you put it in, or the control key. So I should be able to copy that over there, but I'll tell you what, I'm just going to put it down here. There is a way to move things on top of the without it re-estimating, but I apparently forgot what it is. So I'm just going to stick it there. Okay, so I like this idea. This is basically how I do all the Amplio systems, is I'm looking at what's the intention, what's the objective you have. And then the way you get there is up to you. And as long as you meet the objective, it's not a problem. So yeah, each column needs to have things about the same size, which we actually have right now. Now, by the way, if there was a dispute about whether we have a big dog or a little dog and we didn't want to settle it right now, I could have just moved this down here. Okay, this is what's so cool about this. It's very flexible. Okay, Avalon, the hummingbird.
Let's go under sparrow.
Okay. Yeah. And of course, we could also, if we said, well, a hummingbird's smaller than a sparrow, if somebody objected to it, I could come here and I could add a column to the left. I'm fine with what you said, but I could do this as well. See, that's why I like the Miro board. It's kind of cool. You can do this stuff. Where does a giraffe go? That'd be Wahid. Or you can move it, sorry, or tell me to move it. Or maybe I'll go to Ian. I'm not sure. Oh, you got it. Okay. Okay, cool. And then finally, the elephant. Okay. Okay, so now at this point, okay, so any questions or comments? It's actually really simple. You can see how this would be a lot faster than going through them necessarily one at a time. But let me tell you a couple things that happened. That is one of the reasons I really got excited about this, because see, I like things that handle all situations where the guidance of it tells you how to finish it. You don't have to go look, oh, what do I do? What does this thing say? I really kind of hate that. But rather, oh, it gives me the objective, the intention, and but I get the result. So now what happened with these guys? Remember, a bunch of PhDs, a bunch of very specialized. One of the topics came up that only one guy, I think, knew what to do about. Okay, they had very stable. So this was, and these are also PhDs. They weren't easy to find. So sometimes you couldn't cross-train something like this. And one guy had a card test, and he was the only one. I said, well, what do we do now? I said, well, you know how to estimate it? You estimate it. Now, what's interesting, like let's say there's an animal that only one person knows what it is, okay? But they know some of this other stuff. So what you do is you can actually have that person make the estimate relative to these other things, and notice how it still works. And they just have to trust that he's the guy, he's the expert. So if there was some kind of animal that, well, everybody I guess knows what a platypus is. Well, let's say nobody knew what a platypus is except one guy, then they could make that estimate relative to things other people knew. So there was some competence. So this is also why doing it all at a group may not work, because it may be just one person. And by having it where you can relate to other things other people know, you kind of get this. So before we finish this, just some questions, or is this kind of clear how to use this?
Al, I posted in the chat. I'm
Oh, thank you.
wondering
I
why-
didn't notice.
All good.
Yeah.
I'm wondering why have columns at all at this stage? They seem like they're getting in the way of facilitation versus helping. What's your take?
I laugh because it's a
Honest
habit.
question.
Oh, it's a great question. It's a great question. You know, it's funny you ask. That's why I laughed. I said, wait a moment, Al. Yeah, that's a good question. Why have columns at all? And the reason I laughed is sometimes I don't use columns, because then you just kind of move things around. Yeah, so I would say use columns or don't use columns. I'll tell you why I used columns in the past. And one reason is just history, which is not a good reason, but I'll mention it, is the fact that team estimation used columns. Okay. Now it would be interesting, because I don't remember, there's another method that's really brilliant that I mentioned, and let's go look at it. James Grenning's planning poker party. I don't know if he uses columns or not. James is a great guy. By the way, if you're looking for test-driven development training in embedded environments, he's the guy. Okay, he's just brilliant. And let's see, I think, I thought he had, yeah, he used columns. So I guess I just thought of columns. Yeah, I thought he used columns. But you're right. But at some point you need to columnize it, because at some point you're going to need to put sizes on them. And we don't want to be getting into arguments about it. So I'd say at some point you want to get columns, but at this stage here, maybe not. And I'm okay with that. What's cool about it, either way, it wouldn't be that much different. This is where little experiments are useful, because it has to do with how are people going to affect things? How do you, does your work relate to the context you're in? Normally, I don't know you need to run a lot of experiments, because I think principles of lean and flow can kind of tell you what to do. But when it comes to human behavior, well, you just got to try things. So yeah, I'd say fine. Okay. Love that, Paul. Just saw your chat. I was going back through the things. Okay, so is that good?
I'm almost as old as you in this stuff, but not quite. You got me by a few.
Yeah, I've been around a long time, but I'm not the oldest. Tom Gill predates me by a lot, and I'm blessed to talk to him a couple times. In fact, I'm talking to him right after this. I'm putting more and more of his work into what I'm doing in Amplio, but that's another story. Okay, so now what we do is we have to look at some sort of, or I'm sorry, were there any other questions, any other comments? Okay. This, by the way, is why I love to use mural boards for training instead of like PowerPoint and stuff. See, because notice you can come back in, like Paul, you could come in and please do, and you could put a comment on here. You can say, wait, you don't need really the columns. I'm going to change the instructions anyway, but you get the idea. Somebody could come in, listen to this video, come to the board and make comments on it, even if I lock down the instructions. And notice how after we do this, somebody who's not in this time zone can look at it and they can adjust things as well. This is what I call asynchronous working, is we work asynchronously where the board gives us information on things. Anyway, let's finish this up. So if we were to be doing estimation for the point of getting work done, and I haven't written up enough about this. I know there's this whole no estimates movement and stuff that Woody Zuhl started, but what's interesting is, and I know Woody is just awesome. He's in San Diego. It's one of my favorite people on the planet, both smart and super nice. He's very gentle, like a little bear. Well, a little bear, a teddy bear, not a black bear or a brown bear. But Anyway, even he is not saying not to estimate. He's saying you got to look to see if it's useful or not. It's weird. I've seen him sometimes talk about when you might want to estimate, and people were attacking him saying no estimates tells us this, or they didn't realize he created it. I always find that's ridiculous. But anyway, what we've got here is this is one of the things I'm doing. If you recollect, when I talked to, you may not have known what I meant, but when I talk about the way I do training, I do them all as learning journeys now. I don't have 2-day classes or half-day classes. Well, I do the Discipline Agile Value Stream Consultant Workshop because it's got certification, and we do that over half-day classes. But then I added this 4-month program of the Value Stream Consultant after it because you need time to learn, and asynchronous learning and mural boards are a big thing. And we have quite a few. If you're not in the Amplio community of practice, you can join for free right here. I'll just click to it too. You can join for free. This talks about it. Then there's a link here to the actual place to register. And then you can actually download these things. They're called RTV files, I think. You need your own mural license. They do not run. This is a board that if you have a mural license, cheap, so $100 a year or something like that, then you could actually run these yourself. And I give them away as a Creative Commons. I have to load this up there, but we don't put all our boards up there, but those that we derived from somebody else, we tend to give away for free because it's like, well, we got it from the community. We give it back to the community. Okay, so now what we do is we want to estimate these, but we have to talk about, we were estimating these, I said, by weight. Now, if we were doing estimates of like what's on a product backlog or iteration backlog, we might use story points. And I like story points actually. And I have found that they're useful. This, first of all, cuts the cost, the time of the estimation down by 75%, at least by a fourth. Some people have told me it goes faster. The communication alone is worth it. The clarification alone is worth that time. Like these guys took 15 minutes to do a couple dozen stories. It was real easy. And they got better communication, better visibility. Now, whether you commit to it, whether management abuses it, those are separate issues. I've actually not had problems with management abusing things. But then again, my consultants and myself always talked about first principles, explain things, respected management. You don't have that now. So people latch onto stuff where they don't understand it because it's not been explained. So if you were doing something like, say, planning off a product backlog, you might use story points, which is not exactly a point a day or something. That's kind of where you start, and then you use it historically. Now, yeah, that's a really good point, Ian. That this is useful for people with, English as a second language, or in other cases, maybe, maybe English as a first language, and you got people in other countries who are driving the thing. But the good point, languaging. Now, the other thing here is that there are ways to do estimations, like I said, of challenges. What we use this for also was the using like estimating products and big products versus another. Now, I do want to actually say one more thing. I'm just thinking in the past of where I've actually done this. So, Paul, I'm going to say that there is a reason to have columns. I'm not saying just abandon them. I'd say take a look. But let me tell you when we use columns. One of the things that was nice when we did this with executives and marketing people is when you have a column, what you're saying is this is significantly less than this, and this is significantly less than this. And when you have columns, you can say that. So it's not clear whether you should or you shouldn't. I won't say I start with them, but consider that. With these marketing people and the people in the product, who are about to kick things off, it was nice to talk about significantly larger than the next one, and columns give you that ability to have the conversation. But that's the good reason. Just momentum is not a good reason, but I admit momentum is the bad reason, and having this ability to say significantly more or less is the good reason. Okay.
Yeah, if you just lock down the columns, you might not have the problem that was actually causing me to comment.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a good point though. But see, this is what's so great. This is what, if you say, this is an example. I want to make a little side comment here. This is an example, these conversations we've been having is an example of what we call explicit workflow. We're explicitly stating how we work together. And this has actually been frowned on by a lot of the leaders in the Scrum community. I mean, Ken Schwaber, and Jeff, after the Lean Kanban conference in Miami, when we kicked off, David Anderson and I kicked off kind of what was the precursor to the Lean Kanban University, that he and I co-formed that. I left, so now it's Kanban University. But the thing is that we were looking at, they kind of trashed the Kanban at that point for some reason before the Agile Alliance conference a few months later. So we decided we had to explain the difference. And it was interesting, both of us, without talking to each other, came up with the same thing. And what that same thing wasn't flow versus time boxing, which is what I thought I was going to say was the number one thing. The number one thing was visibility of work and visibility of the work methods. At that time, we called it process, but since I prefer to call it workflow. So what we're doing here is whatever we do, you just want to make the rules clear. And explicit doesn't mean locked down. Doesn't necessarily mean written up in detail. It just means we've talked about it. So going back to what Paul was saying, we could say, well, here's how we do the board. What we do the board is we start with columns and we look to see if they're impeding us and then we get rid of them. Or you could have a different role. Say, here's what we do. We don't have the columns until we start talking about significantly bigger or significantly less. See, because one basically says we're saying significant, and the second one says we're just putting them in a general order and then we'll columnize it. I think at some point you do have to columnize it so you get a number on it. And what I just did was stated it explicitly. In other words, we're saying what we're working on. So many teams don't have this. When you don't have this, it's very hard to learn because you got all these variations. The variations may be causing the problem, not the work you're doing. Okay, so anyway, this is great because we're getting a lot of little lessons in here, not just learning the board. And that's also why I like to use these and why I like to make the recording. Now, by the way, the recording will be made available immediately by tomorrow anyway, should be this afternoon, to people in the Amplio community practice. We then open it up to everybody 2 weeks. It's like we want you to get in there, but you have a lot of good reasons. There's a lot of good stuff in the community that's free. So anyway, let's come back here. So now what we've got to do, and now this is a joint effort. We look at what we're going to be measuring, and sometimes, you know, if we say like a hummingbird, well, let's see, what are we going to use? We're going to use this is funny because a hummingbird isn't even a pound. If we're going to use pounds, a hummingbird might be a fourth of a pound. But we're not going to worry about it when they're too small. So I'm just going to come through here and we'll say, let's say, you know, less than a pound. Oops, less than a pound. And in fact, even a sparrow is even less than a half a pound. You know, so I could start where I want to. Maybe this isn't such a good example because I'm getting down into the weeds like this, but you just basically put these here, and these little guys. Oops. If you highlight something, do Control C, then move the cursor to where you want it to be, and Control V, it copies it. I'm going to say less than a pound. I don't know how big sparrows are. I know how big they are size-wise. I have no idea what they weigh. Okay, so what's a monkey weigh? And remember, we're using we're going to use, regardless of what the weight is. And you know what? I'm suggesting this. You use whatever number system you want, okay? I've locked things down, so I've got to unlock them a little bit here, okay? Let me lock it back, come down here. Okay, so what's a monkey weigh? $20 pounds, 8 pounds? Monkeys aren't that heavy, 13 pounds? You get the idea. I may be doing a bad job here, but an eagle, actually, eagles and monkeys. Is a monkey lighter than an eagle? So now we talk about it. I don't think so.
Well, yeah, no, I think that we inserted the monkey because eagle and dog were together. But yeah, I would move the eagle and the monkey together.
Okay, cool. And now if I want to, I could come up here, I could click this, and I could delete the column. See, it's kind of cool. A big dog is what, 25 pounds, 30? No, big dog would be about 40 pounds. So I don't have to go to the next one. See, this is important. I'm not going to the next one. I skip it. Well, there's a big gap there, but I don't need to worry about it. I'll put 40 here. The point isn't that I'm doing this right. The point is that you get what I'm talking about. See, now a bear and a lion, those are probably a couple 100 pounds. You get my point. I don't need to finish this. Okay, so are there questions about it? Otherwise, I'll kind of wrap up some of the advantages we talked about and make some notes. I've got the chat in front of me, or you can come off mute and talk about it. Oops, I don't want to do that.
If once you get to the bigger things, I mean, here you wouldn't, but when you get to bigger pieces of work, do you then start splitting them so that
Okay,
you
well,
can?
I wouldn't necessarily. You could. Well, it depends. I'm sorry. I should have answered that question because it depends on the context you're in. So if you're in the context of I'm trying to do this so I can create a product backlog or go from a product backlog to an iteration backlog, yeah, then I mean, oh, we got to split these because they're too big. On the other hand, if I'm doing this where I'm just trying to create what's going on to the product backlog and I don't care about the details, you know, like when we did estimation for marketing, everything we did was about 100, 200, 400, 800, and this keeps going up. You know what I mean? But after 800, it's just like really big. So
Right.
then you don't need to split it up. So there's a concept that we use in Amplio that we call a minimum business increment. This is like the smallest thing you could deliver. Now, MBIs could be a day's work. They could also be 6 months work. You're writing a flight control system for an airplane. You don't get that done in 2 weeks. So the timing of an MBI is what's the smallest thing I can build that's of value to the customer. Now, I don't build it as a big waterfall thing. I build it as a slice, a slice, a slice, a slice. But I don't need to break it up except for 2 reasons. One, if I need to break it up to get clarity on what it is, and that's just the approach on minimum business increments. There are 2 different ways of doing it. You take it from the small pieces up or take it from the big piece down. They both work. So if I'm doing something like I need clarity, I might break it up. If I'm doing it like I'm about to go and work on it, I might break it up. But that would be the determining factor. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you break it up also due to clarity. You know, I don't know what that is. Now, in this case, you're not breaking up an animal, but here's something actually I meant to mention. I just remember, this is one reason I really got into this. I loved it so much. Is I remember we were doing some product estimation, like it was more than a feature, but it was like, we're going to build something. And somebody put like, here, let me just, somebody put a feature here. And then somebody put, you know, so they had a feature there and they were already estimating, and then they put a feature. So we had these 2 features, A and B. And one person was sure that B was bigger than A, and the other person said, no, A is bigger than B. See, now this is interesting because maybe you, you know, might not get the exact size, effort. I remember we were doing effort for this. But for one person to think it's easier to do A than B, and the other person thinks it's easier to do B than A, what are the reasons that might happen?
Expertise and knowledge would be one.
It could be expertise and knowledge, absolutely. Somebody might know how to do A faster than B. That's one reason. There's another reason. What are A and B? In other words, what happened in this case, the person who thought B was bigger than A didn't understand what B was. So this kind of relative estimation, without going into much detail, it exposed it like in 2 minutes. I was like, oh, you think B is going to take longer than this, and the other person thinks it's going to take less. It could have been expertise, but that's not what it was the case here. So both of these are good reasons to do this relative, and it's real fast. See, at that point, we just stopped talking about it. As long as we were laying it out, this is what's also nice. As long as we were laying it out and people more or less agreed, you didn't have to spend much time on it. But the moment there was some real confusion and disagreement, then we had a 5-minute conversation. Well, what is A? What is B? And it turns out one of the items that was being talked about had been misinterpreted. Yeah, no, I never go down a planning poker. Because you just then settle the issues and then you just put it in the relative column. There's really no need as far. Yeah, just I'm going to read what Paul said here. It's in the chat.
It was long. I meant to save it for later, Al.
Yeah,
Well-
no, that's okay. That's okay. It actually brings up an interesting point, and I'm going to talk about this now. So no, that triggers a lot, Paul. So really, thank you. So yeah, I learned how to use story points from Ron, even though he's now said, no, don't use them and all that. But let me explain 2 things here. There are 2 very important things here. First of all, I've been a lean guy for a long time. In the late 80s, I had a business consultant who got into Toyota and lean and Deming, and we studied it back then. So my background goes a long ways back. What's that? 34 years I've been studying Deming, and actually I got introduced to lean back then too. I didn't use it in software for all sorts of dumb reasons until, I don't know, about 15, 17 years ago. And I guess when the Popendix book came out, I was like, duh, why haven't I been using this in building software? But admittedly, I'm stupid sometimes, or I'm blind to things. So what I immediately liked, though, knowing something about Toyota, was one of the things lean tells us. And by the way, lean is not about manufacturing any more than physics is about apples falling on people's head. That is just where the idea came from, okay? And one of the things lean tells us is that you don't focus on how busy people are. You don't focus on the time of the work. You focus on the time between the work steps. And the ideal day of work was a real problem because, well, how much do you get done in a day? And it's hard to tell how much you get done in a day because it varies based on a variety of things. So the idea of a story point, there's no measure to it. It does 2 things. First of all, it's just meant to be used for like yesterday's weather. I did 50 story points last week, then I'll expect to get about 50 story points this week. If people want me to do more, then, well, if I learn how to make the system better so I go faster, that's great. But basically, I'm going to assume yesterday's weather, I think Martin Fowler came up with that term, is the best way to measure it. So there are 2 points here. One is it gives you a measuring method that's relative that the team uses to estimate. It's not meant for management at all. I'll talk about that in a second. But the other one is it gets us off this idea of time. If you start talking about time, you're in trouble. That's not what lean is about. Lean is about flow. And it's about focusing on removing delays between things, not how much time it takes to do the individual steps. So the moment you start thinking about the time it takes to do something, whoever you're talking to, if they talk about it that way, you know they're not a lean person because lean people don't talk about it that way. It's the antithesis of lean. Lean's trying to get you away from talking about time and instead talk about removing delays. Now that'll get you quicker, but you're not talking about time of the work itself. Now the second point is this, and this is very important. I know I'm getting a little bit more philosophical about Amplio and lean and flow and theory of constraints, but it's important. Management abusing estimates is not a reason not to do estimates. It's a reason to educate management on what they are. And the reason I think Agile community has so much problems with management is because people discount them. People don't treat them fairly. People expect them to have caused problems, and it's like Ford said, no matter whether you think you can or think you can't, or I'll paraphrase it, whether you think they will or think they won't resist, you're going to be right. Having called them chickens and not committed for years, the fact that we don't tell the chicken and pig story doesn't mean that philosophy isn't underneath all this. You just pay attention to any LinkedIn, not any, look at the LinkedIn posts that talk about management. You'll see 80% or something like that are talking about management in a disparate way. It's one of the reasons I love The Choice. One of many reasons I love The Choice by Ellie Goldratt And he talks about command and control. That's not a question of I'm trying to do command and control. It's a question of discomfort because I don't know, I don't understand what's going on. So anyway, this is another aspect, but the estimation, at least, look, even if you're having all your other problems, it'll now take you 25% of the time it did before. Okay, so trying to think if there was anything else I really wanted to do here. So I'm open for questions. I'm looking at the chat as well. Yeah, and I'll write up this. I like to listen to the lessons. I'll write up the lessons that we have here and put that in here. Oh, I know what I wanted to show. Let's hang on one second. For those of you, this is Success Mentors. Success Mentors, this is what's on the Amplio Community Practice a little bit. Success Mentors is a joint effort between my company, Success Engineering, and Joshua Barnes' company, Process Mentors, hence Success Mentors. And we have a variety of things. Ones I offer, you should look at all these. If you're interested in discipline agile, that's really more Joshua's bailiwick, and he teaches all these except we jointly teach this one. My Amplios are here, and the community of practice is here.